Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Grotmas Calendar Day 3. What happened to Day 2? Well, ask Games Workshop, because Nightmare Hunt did not spark enough joy for me to be willing to put a video together on it on really short notice. That one will come when I have a chance, and when someone writes a list that I actually don't think looks better in Creations of Bile or Renegade Raiders. We are here today to talk about the new Blood Angels Detachment. This is Rage-Cursed Onslaught. It's a Death Company-focused detachment. We're going to do the usual. We're going to have a bit of a breakdown, kind of talk about what's interesting and why it's interesting, how I think you would best be running it, what sort of units would be interesting, a sample list, and then some thoughts on where it'll stack up and how interesting it is. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So Rage-Cursed Onslaught is a really, really simple detachment on the face of it. It is reroll ones to wounded melee, which is a great little buff. It's just a 17% output increase for everything you've got. It works pretty well with devastating wounds. If you've got a bunch of sustained hits, it synergizes really well with that. And obviously, many of the Death Company units in Blood Angels already have reroll hits because that's their data sheet rule. They reroll hits in melee. So it really does make sure that you kind of get over the line with just having good, consistent damage output all the time. The other half of this rule is +1 attack on the charge, and you get +2 attacks instead if you are battle shocked. There are a few ways in this setting to battle shock yourself, which is definitely synergistic with that. It means it's quite nice to be able to kind of get that output going. If you can compare this to the most obvious example, which is Liberator Assault Group, which is +1 attack and +2 strength on the charge. A lot of the time, you'll find that the +1 attack obviously is equivalent. Reroll ones to wound is always a 17% output increase. +2 strength is generally going to be somewhere in the region of, if it takes you from wounding on 3s to wounding on 2s, it is roughly a 25% damage increase. If it takes you from wounding on 6s to wounding on 5s, it is a 100% damage output increase. And what that kind of tells us that, like, on a baseline level, +1 reroll ones to wound is nowhere near as good as +2 strength, right? Like, that just like flatly baseline. Worth saying at the beginning, the Liberator Assault Group detachment benefit on the face with, if you do not trigger the +2 attack, is just a stronger bonus. And I think that's an important thing to contextualize coming into this. There are a lot of data sheets that I think are very powerful in Liberator that don't quite translate over to this detachment as well. It almost feels like you need to have like a good reason to have something else besides it. Things like scouts and jump back intercessors are not nearly as interesting to me in this detachment. They get the attack volume, but being capped at strength 4 mostly, with the exception of one stratagem, does kind of put a damper on those like small trading pieces that Liberator is quite well known for. The version that's playing like lots of incursors, reavers, scouts, jump back intercessors, vanguard veterans, right, all that kind of stuff that lets them punch up above their weight quite a lot. This detachment doesn't really do that. It makes you more consistent, but it kind of makes you're still only really taking things in your weight bracket without with a couple of specific exceptions. For enhancements, we have a chaplain gains Scout 6 and reroll battle shocks within 6 inches. Some cool things you can do with this. You can reroll battle shocks to try to fail them to trigger your +2 attacks. I don't recommend doing that a ton, but it is a thing you're allowed to do. Scout 6, obviously a really powerful buff. It works in transport, so you can do that with like a 5 of Death Company with a chaplain inside a impulsor. I think that's kind of the only real use case, unfortunately. There aren't any really good firstborn units that you can put in a Rhino still, that would benefit from Scout 6. I don't believe that there's much, like, I'm not taking a tactical Marine squad to join a chaplain to it to give them Scout 6, and go off with that with that +1 to wound in the Rhino. If we still had Death Company that could go embark in Rhinos like we did in the Sons of Sanguinius days, this would be a much more interesting enhancement for that. But as it stands, it's still quite good on an Impulsor. It's definitely not a thing that you'll be upset to have. It's also just very good for a foot Death Company squad or a jump pack Death Company squad to use a staging area you wouldn't otherwise be able to access on turn 1, and it can really increase that threat range. When we kind of talk about the stratagems, you have your advance and charge stratagem, which does give you the ability to kind of project a ton of throughout the board on turn 1, right? Like, you have effectively movement 18 with a average of 10.5 inches of threat range on top of that. So you're threatening nearly 30 inches into your opponent's deployment zone. That's 6 inches into the deployment zone in most deployments where you're 24 inches apart, and much, much further than that in something like potentially Tipping Point or Search and Destroy, where you start even closer than that. So you can project a lot of threat on turn 1 with this, or have a unit deployed very aggressively that can move to safety. And you can do some really big stuff with this, like 10 mana Death Company, even if you want to, or even just a 5 mana, right? There's nothing requiring you to play this on a Death Company unit, which I think is a powerful part of that. We have a fight first once per game. This is good everywhere it shows up. It's nice to have a unit that can rapid ingress and heroic and then charge in and protect something that you were expecting to lose, or just being able to like heroic intervention from on the board kind of positions. Always a good enhancement to kind of keep an eye on, and worth including if you've got the opportunity. Being able to get that +1 attack on the charge and having that reroll ones to wound, with the changes to Sanguinary Guard now hitting on 2s, and with Death Company having full hit rerolls, you don't need to like set this up in the same way that you might need to in some other armies with Fight First, where if you don't have both of them, it's not really worth charging in. A lot of Blood Angels units will just do good damage with this buff naturally. Then we have a +1 strength for Death Company within 6 enhancement. This is only expensive at 35 points, and the reason that it's really expensive is one, it's an aura. There are not a ton of those this edition, and two, it's not restricted to only melee weapons. So this does affect multi-melters on your Death Company Dreadnought, Infernal Pistols on your Death Company, Plasma Pistols, Hand Flamers, anything you can think of. Like this does give that +1 strength, and it also gets you a lot of the way towards that Liberator Assault Group bonus, which is why when we were talking earlier about the detachment bonus as a baseline, yeah, okay, it's not straight as Liberator, but this is going to put your Power Fist to strength 9. It's going to put your Chain Swords to strength 5. Those are very, very impactful breakpoints, especially when you've got +1 to wound from a chaplain, or less impactful if you have lethal hits coming out of Dante. There's a cool synergy here with like +1 strength just being good all the time. It also helps with like cracking transports and things like that. So generally a good buff. At 35 points is running steep, especially when it's tied to a specific character. A lot of the play pattern of this is kind of encouraging you to have one big all in where everything goes in at once, all within 6 of the character, and then you can activate everything at once. And that is not always a thing you'll be able to guarantee, right? You just can't always know you're going to commit everything at the same time, and it doesn't work amazingly well when you're doing the sort of like generic trading pattern. But even still, a really really cool buff, and one that is definitely a build around if you want to play this. Like you lean into this pretty hard, and I think it encourages you towards playing more Death Company than other stuff because you want to get value out of that 35 point enhancement. And the last enhancement is sustained hits 2 versus character, monster, vehicle units in melee only. This is 25 points. It is Rage Fueled Warrior Light. There are very few things that you will be fighting that are none of these three things, where you will lose on the scene. The only things that I can think about in this sort of current meta game are like the 10-man Blight Lord squad that Virulent Victorum has started playing. Potentially like there are a few other like big infantry squads. Custodian Guard in the sort of like the Shield Host build, like the 5-mans wouldn't trigger this. But there are very few things out there that I'm like particularly worried about in the current environment where you would not be just like killing them anyway because you're a Blood Angels unit in melee with them. And I really, really think that it's a very, very good replacement for that. I think typically you'll probably just play this on a Power Fist Blood Angels Captain, for all the same reasons that we've always done that. The ability to have more sustained hits with the chainsword does not make up for the lower strength and the fact that you will just wound less, especially without the +2 strength from Liberator Assault Group. So I think in general, I would expect to see this on a Power Fist on a Blood Angels Captain using the once per game for the +3 attacks, and going in and trying to nuke something. But the comparison with this for Rage Shield Warriors, it does have a use case of you can keep going. You get to go and charge a second thing. That guy, very frequently, the Rage Shield Warrior Captain can be a little bit ignorable once he's done his thing because he's not quite as good in combat anymore. He's still a captain, right? He still punches pretty hard, 6 attacks, strength 10, AP2 damage 2. But this guy will always have sustained hits too. And that means that you don't have to feel bad about like heroicing, popping it. You don't have to like, you can like just go for the fences into a thing regularly. You potentially save it. Yeah, I think it's a really, really interesting little enhancement. And definitely, I think the one that I would most likely to all include. I think that one is the one I would always want to bring. Now, for stratagems, we have, I'm going to rattle off Armor Contempt. It's here, it's live, it's as good as it always is. It is still capped by the data restriction to being only lasting for an activation. That's still pretty good, especially in melee. We have Blood Angels units can sticky on death. Now, notably, this is Blood Angels keyworded, so it will not affect any of the generic data sheets from the core codex, but anything like Sanguinary Guard, Blood Angels Captains, the Sanguinor, Mephiston, a Ball Predator, anything you can think of, can sticky an objective when it dies, just like World Eaters do. This stratagem is really good. It forces your opponent to come to you because they can't just shoot you off objectives. If you want to stand on the middle and they don't want to do that, then you can kind of force some interactions. It's very good with like the Blood Angels Lone Operatives, Mephiston and the Sanguinor, because they can stand on an objective, force your opponent to come within 12, and then you can potentially charge into them. And you have to put something pretty real out to one-shot those characters, especially Mephiston. They are both still quite expensive. I don't have either of them in the sort of provisional list that I've started, but this is the kind of thing that would be really interesting in that space. I think Ball Predators are another really interesting place for this because people don't tend to want to walk near a Ball Predator because of the Overwatch potential, and then you can just be like, okay, cool, I'm going to stick you on death this anyway. A really good stratagem to have in your arsenal. It definitely encourages me towards playing like mixed units if I'm playing anything with that is from the core Space Marine Codex. I want it to have a Blood Angels character, and if I'm playing a regular character, I want it to join a Blood Angels unit, in order to make sure that I'm having like one of the two halves of the unit is able to do the sticky on death. It's just a transformational strategy. Okay, we have 1 CP, Death Company, have 5 foot Film Pain to the end of the phase. Typically, this is going to be a lot better than Armor Contempt under most use cases. Going from a 6 foot Film Pain to a 5 foot Film Pain is, well, a 5 foot Film Pain is 2.5 times better than a 6 of Philippine. A 6 of Philippine is a 20% durability increase. A 5 of Philippine is a 50% durability increase, or in terms of like the number of wounds it takes to kill you. So because the multiplicative effect of taking feel no pains. So in general, really really good strategy, especially on Lamarty's 10-man. Lamarty's Death Company are -1 to wound. Or -1 damage, 5 of feel no pain is an incredibly frustrating thing to have to get through for a lot of armies, especially if you're coming in with damage 2 weapons will do very little. Damage 3 weapons are 44% chance to kill a guy per activation. So if they're damage 3 down to damage 2, it becomes more likely than not that you will survive an attack, and it gives you an incredible chance of surviving multiple, which is yeah, very difficult to deal with under the wrong circumstances, especially if you're trying to like nickel and dime the unit in shooting before you charge into it so that it can't fight on death or anything like that. Okay, there is a 1 CP for +1 strength or AP, and you can battle shock yourself for both. This is the same sort of mechanic that Liberate Assault Group has, where they have a stratagem that does a thing or another thing, and you can choose to become battle shocked in order to do both. Now, this does have an additional synergy in this detachment, obviously, of giving you an extra +1 attack. So because it's on a charging unit, you will at this point be going in with +1 strength, +1 AP, +2 attacks, and reroll ones to wound. That is a lot of buffs to stack on top of a unit. You're taking a Death Company model with a Power Fist from 3 attacks at 822 to 5 attacks at 932, rerolling ones to wound. That is just incredibly transformational for the data sheet. You will be doing almost double or more the damage that you would have been compared to the baseline data sheet. Obviously, on top of that, you've got potentially any character buffs. Lamarty's gives lethal hits. Chaplains with jump packs give +1 to wound. Really powerful. So the +1 AP part of this is, for me, the part that makes this much more interesting over Liberate Assault Group. Liberate Assault Group has a little bit of an AP problem where it's almost entirely AP2. And anything with like -1 damage and armor of contempt is just impossible to chew through. At this point, you're pushing to AP3. A unit of Death Knights or Redemptive Dread or anything like that can't just armor of contempt and know that they're taking 3 saves against you. They will have to like at least take their fair share of saves. Yes, the -1 damage is still going to be a pain, but there is more way to cut through that than there is in other ones. Sanguinary Guard going to hitting on 2s definitely helped a ton with their sort of like general baseline use case here. Being able to push them to AP4 is also quite good in the world of things like Victrix Guard with their 2-up base save. So yeah, I think I'm a big fan of the stratagem. It really does a lot, and the fact that you can choose to use it for like giving your effectively also being a +1 attack stratagem when you need it to be is great if you think you're sending your unit on a one-way trip, which as Blood Angels you generally assume you're sending your units on a one-way trip. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the other stratagem that's in the same vein here, which is the advance and shoot or charge stratagem, and then you can battle shock yourself for both. Again, just advance and charge is incredible. It's incredibly powerful for any melee unit to have the option. The fact that it's any one of your units can use it means your opponent has to play around every single one of your units having the ability to use it. So I am threatening that any of my units can advance and charge, so you must play as if everything will advance and charge, which just diminishes the space your opponent's eligible to play in without taking risks. And then you can make a decision, what's the best advance and charge? You also use it after the advance roll, as I understand it. I believe the stratagem wording exactly is just after a unit from your army advances. So I believe you should be able to roll the advance roll, make the movement, see where they land, see if your opponent overwatches potentially, and then make a decision about whether to use the stratagem. So you have a decent amount of control over committing with this or not, right? You will have to get out of a transport if you're playing one. You will have to threaten to move forward. But if you roll a 2, you can just say, oh, well, that's not the unit that's using advance and charge. Whereas something like World Eaters with their Berserker advance and charge stratagem have to commit. They have to say, this is the thing that is advance and charging, and then roll the dice, which can be very all in, very committal. And Blood Angels sidestep that, which I think is really powerful. And yeah, the ability to battle shock yourself here, I think it's less impactful here. The advance and shoot is fine. It's okay. Certainly, you will not be upset to have the option to, but you will mostly be doing that to yourself in order to trigger the +1 attack and maybe to try to pop like a couple of models in a unit with fight first or pop a transport with some Inferno pistols. But Death Company units typically don't shoot that hard. I think this is most interesting for advanced shoot and charge on like a Death Company Dreadnought with its like multi-melta, but in general, yeah, not all that big a fan. Like I don't think that's the thing you're going to be doing super ton. And then the last stratagem is 2 CP. Death Company unit can fight on death. This is obviously very powerful. Fight on death is a great mechanic. Death Company naturally have reroll hits, which is great. And this is one of the things that was missing when we kind of made the transition from Sons of Sanguinius to Liberate Assault Group was that fight on death did go away, and it removed one of the biggest like agency points for this army going into like other melee armies, right? And it's one of the things that made Liberator quite weak into other melee mirror matches is that it just didn't have a great way to handle its opponent charging it, because all of its buffs are contingent on charging. In this detachment, you will still keep your reroll ones to wound. You will probably still have reroll to hit, which means that you are not just going in completely raw with just data sheet buffs, which I think is quite powerful here. There's actually a cool synergy here with the Death Company on foot, where they have sustained hits 2 when they are below half strength. If you lose the full squad in one activation, they will always be below half strength, so they will have sustained hits 2 with full rerolls on their full activation fight on death, which is it's there. I still don't think it makes me want to run a Death Company on foot squad. I think they're still just a little too slow, and the fact that they can't go in a Rhino anymore, right? You're restricted to an Impulsor or foot slogging, or going very much more expensive and playing a regular Repulsor, which I just don't think is feasible. 180 points for not a lot of data sheet. But there is that is a thing, like it's a thing you can do and is kind of interesting. Also not terrible on a the Death Company Dreadnought again, right? It is a Brutalis Dreadnought after all. It's got a decent amount of damage to attacks. It can also, you can kind of use this as like fight first protection. You charge into something, you have your +1, you have your +1 attack, you have your rear ones to wound, and then you just die. But you took their interrupt, you took the fight first, they've traded 2 CP for your 2 CP, but hopefully you've killed their unit the same anyway, which usually will pan out like being in your favor if you've done it on an aggressive turn, or you can like have hit multiple things, they fight you, they kill you, you kill the other thing anyway, and maybe the thing that you charged isn't or like takes half of the damage, and the other thing takes all of the rest of the damage, right? You do the power fist into the scary thing, and then your chain swords into the thing you needed to kill that was on an objective or for a secondary or anything like that. It can, like, Death Company squads can be quite large to do this with, right? Like especially the 10 man with Lamarties gives you some decent flexibility for this. Notably though, the thing I don't love about this sort of like battle shock yourself thing here is you have a lot of defensive stratagems here, right? If we kind of pull it out, there's an armor of contempt, there's a sticky on death, there is a fight on death, and there's the 5 of Philippine, right? All 4 of the stratagems are reactive stratagems, things you want to do in response to what your opponent is doing. And battle shocking yourself makes you unable to do all of those things. So you do have to be really careful that when you're doing the kind of like I send one thing, it does a job, it dies, right? When you're playing that trading game, you are going to be making yourself worse at the trading game by doing that. So it's definitely a detachment that encourages all inning. You're like, this is the one thing that's getting the stratagem, it's going to battle shock itself. That thing is perfectly welcome to die. But on the response turn, you then, that's a place your opponent knows you can't interrupt. That's a place that your opponent knows you can't use defensive strategies, so they can plan around that much more trivially, which I think is a thing to just be like a little conscious of, that there are definitely some fail state mechanics there. Also, it can make stuff like secondaries a little bit harder, right? If you need that damage output to make sure you get like storm hostile objective or anything like that, you just won't, right? Like you will just fail that. I believe the only thing to be aware of, the one thing to be aware of with this, I believe Sanguinary Guard have the banner wording, which works for keeping an OC on them, right? So I'm just going to double check this one myself, because Sanguinary Guard are unlike something like Vitric Guard or Inner Circle Companions that are just OC2, and the banner doesn't give them an OC, but they have a banner in the kit. The Sanguinary Guard banner does actually give them +1 OC, so you will maintain 1 OC while battle shocked. So you will go down to OC 0, then the banner will add 1 because you set to 0 and then you add 1. So Sanguinary Guard are a little less offended about battle shocking themselves because they will at least keep the OC and they can still flip objectives, which it's not like a reason to take Sanguinary Guard, but if you are already taking Sanguinary Guard anyway, which I think the version that I've drafted up does, that does give you a little bit of synergy there, right? Where you don't feel like you're completely ruining your ability to play the secondary game just by trading in a squad of Sanguinary Guard. And I think just playing like a 3-mana Sanguinary Guard without a attached character gives you a reasonable trading piece for not, I'm not going to call them cheap, but not an extortionate amount of points. You can fit quite a lot of stuff in if you're going down that kind of route. All right, let's take a look at some of the key data sheets, and I'll have called most of these out already. Death Company with jump packs, I think, are the biggest beneficiary of this attachment. They're a good data sheet anyway. They have reroll charges, they have reroll hits, they are very self-sufficient, and you can afford to spend a lot of CP on these good stratagems for them. They have good attached characters, like the Chaplain with jump pack and Lamarties. Chaplain with jump pack gives you +1 to wound and some additional mortal wound output, and Lamarties gives you -1 damage and lethal hits. I like the idea of having 2 5-mans with chaplains with jump packs. You get your 3 heavy weapons in that squad for decent efficiency. You're not paying for the full 10-man. You have a smashy character. They hit pretty hard. They don't take up a ton of space, and they can be your sort of like active, I don't want to call them trading pieces, but trading pieces. And they have sticky on death, so your opponent's kind of encouraged into interacting with them, at which point you can do fight on death, all that kind of stuff. So you can drag your opponent to you a little bit as well. And then the 10-man with Lamarties can be your like big hammer and anvil, not the map type, like your big hammer rapid ingress threat that comes down and cleans up the late game while being very hard to kill. And you have so many, you have 4 different options for interacting with this unit defensively now, excluding, so you have like go to ground, to give them an invulnerable save and a cover. You have the 5 of Feel No Pain, you have Armoric Attempt, and you have Fight on Death. So a lot of ways to make your opponent very, very punished for going to these. And that's a unit that benefits a ton from the +1 attack, +2 attacks. +2 attacks on Lamar a squad with lethal hits is very, very synergistic. I have Captain with Sanguinary Guard. I really like the Sanguinary Guard unit in this detachment. Like, you can play it with the swords. They are AP 4 if you want them to be. They go to strength 8 because you can use +1 strength from the captain and +1 strength from the stratagem, from the stratagem to get them the AP on top of that. They keep their OC while they're battle shocked because of the banners. Captains give you free stratagems. Like, just generically a pretty good set of stuff here. I think I should also include Dante in there. +1 to advance and charge is still very powerful. The battle shock aura is not bad. If you're battle shocking yourself, the best way to make sure you flip an objective is to battle shock your opponent or have them be dead. So I still like Dante for that kind of thing there. And Dante does like some of the buffs here, being able to push Dante to AP4 as well. Definitely not impactful. Captain with Assault Intercessors or Stern Guard, just generically a good unit, as it has been everywhere. The Space Marine Captain data sheet is generically quite powerful. The Blood Angels one specifically gets the Blood Angels keyword, so we can use the Sticky on Death stratagem, which is a good place to be with your small trading unit, especially if you're going the Assault Intercessor squad with OC2. You can kind of go in, trade for a thing, put a bunch of OC on it. While the objective your opponent shoots you off, you sticky it. Cool. And then also the synergy with this Intercessors of your opponent is likely to have to walk onto objectives a little more because you are threatening to sticky them on death. So your opponent will likely be triggering you being able to go into them with full rerolls a little more often. Stern Guard give you the ability to be independent of your opponent being on the objective. You can just have reroll wounds against anything that's your roll target. Assault Intercessors have reroll 1 to wound all the time, so they're a little less synergistic because of the detachment. They are definitely going to want to chase things on objectives a little more. For me, I like the Assault Intercessors a little more in this detachment because the ability to give them +1 AP, being able to push them to AP2 does help a ton with getting through like armor contempted things, where Stern Guard are AP0 on everybody but the Power Fist. So the actual baseline unit of Stern Guard is a little less powerful. And I think with this detachment, because you're getting a little less out of the captain, right? It's not Rageful Warrior, it's sustain 2 or not sustain 3. You're getting a little less baseline strength without using stratagems. I want the Assault Intercessors to be a little hittier because the unit as a whole is a little less hitty. The last thing I wanted to call out here is that, yeah, some of the stranger Death Company units like Dreadnoughts or Death Company on foot might have some play here. When I build detachment lists for detachments like this, my preference is always to go for, let's take the things that we know work, the data sheets and ideas that we know have been strong core competencies before, and update them to suit this detachment rather than going whole hog into brand new ideas. And yeah, sometimes, I think, I'd like to be a little more conservative in this step. None of these data sheets have been particularly inspiring so far this edition, and I don't know if this detachment is going to bring out enough from them to make them so. But if they did, I think those are the ones that I would be interested in. The Death Company Dreadnought being a Brutalis Dreadnought. Its rule is a little sadder, but yeah, still could be interesting. And the Death Company on foot with the synergy with Fight on Death, I think could be interesting. 2 CP is a lot to pay in Blood Angels, though. All right, here's my sample list. So this is kind of very much going down that route of I want to play the stuff that works well with this detachment. So we have Dante with his squad of Sanguinary Guard. We have Lamartis with his squad of 10 Death Company with jump packs. A Blood Angels Captain with Angel's Fang, which is the Sustained Hits 2 enhancement. Blood Angels Captain specifically to make sure you can use the Sticky on Death stratagem. We have a Chaplain with jump pack with Carmine Reliquary, which is the Scout 6 and Reroll Battle Shocks enhancement. We have a Chaplain with jump pack. Both of those will be joining 5s of Death Company with jump packs. Captain would jump up with Master of Red Thirst. That's the Fight First enhancement. He'll be in a 3 Sanguinary Guard, and then another Captain would jump back in a Sanguinary Guard squad. Lieutenant the combi weapon. Yes, you're not getting a ton out of the reroll 1s to wound. Oh no, he's still a really good lone operative with a reactive move. I still think you should also include him in every Space Marine list. I can't remember the last time I saw one that didn't have him. And then we have, as the sort of things that are not already attached to us, so we have the Assault Intercessors joining the Blood Angels Captain, 5 Intercessors. I have 5 Incursors or 5 Infiltrators here. You can do the Incursors in the Impulsor combo to scout it forward, disembark them, then jump the unit in behind it, which gives you some additional reach on turn 1. Or you can do Infiltrators for like a more secure backfield or front field, a little bit meta dependent. If you wanted to change the Carmine Reliquary on the Chaplain with jump pack, which is the Battleshock Aura, to the +1 strength enhancement, that would be where you would find the 5 points. By taking the cheaper version of those. And I think you could potentially tweak this around as well if you wanted to change the Assault Intercessors to Stern Guard. That would be the kind of places that you would look for these minor tweaks, like making them scouts potentially. And then, yeah, 5 scouts and an impulsor. Impulsor to take the Assault Intercessor plus Blood Angels Captain. I like the idea of having the ability to deploy that a little more aggressively and then throw it forward, giving you some stuff to do on turn 1. You, between like scouting that and having an impulsor that can push forward, you have quite a lot of ability to have a really good turn 1. And then when you back that with the ability to have a really good turn 2 with rapid ingressing and just having bottom of turn scoring, I think this is a list that's got a good dynamism for playing both sides of the coin. Obviously, the biggest thing to shout here is there is basically no shooting in this army. I think this detachment does a really bad job of supporting shooting, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. But generally, I'm on team just play the things the detachment tells you to play and don't worry too much about it. I think if you wanted to go down the route of playing maybe two repulsor executioners would be the position that I would start looking at, because they can transport some stuff. Or doing vindicators and ball predators, sort of like Borgia's style of list from LGT and Worlds, like that kind of style. I think it's fine. I don't think the detachment does a ton to help you. And it's not kind of where my head goes for this detachment. But if you were really worried about shooting meta game, that's the kind of place I would look. And then you obviously have the easy answers. Lancers, Redemption Dreadnoughts, Ballista Dreadnoughts. They're all so boring. They're all just bloody. They're all just the same Space Marine units that we've been playing for the whole edition. They are still the best shooting options, and nothing has really changed there. All right. So detachment strengths and weaknesses. So this attachment offers you a strong ability to just say, my stuff does more damage. And that is always good, right? It's never bad to just have your datasheet do more than it says on the tin, especially when they're Space Marine datasheets. Space Marine datasheets are quite good. And you have Oath of Moment to make your datasheets do a little more on top of that. You have a flexible strategy suite. You have damage, durability, and deliverability, if we're going to use Sam Pope's verbiage, and some good conditional utility. The Sticky on Death stratagem has been propping up World Eaters for a long time. And I think that it is as good here as it is there. Because you are just as much trying to make your opponent come to you. I think this detachment plays a lot like Index World Eaters does. You have a little less option to advance and charge, but a lot more speed. Everything being movement 12 baseline as opposed to the movement 6 and 8 that they were for World Eaters does give you a lot of ability to say, I am here, I am fighting. And that's why I think you can get away with playing a little less guns, is because there is so much ability to just deliver your damage to your opponent. The enhancements are expensive, but they're all pretty good. I think all four of them have a really solid use case. I like the combination of Fight First, Scout, and Sustain 2, but I very much would not be surprised if there was like a 30 Death Company build that was playing around the +1 strength enhancement, or even maybe 50 or 60. I could see a world where you were doing like 10 10 5 5 of the foot ones, 10 10 10 of the jump pack ones, and just be like, I am all in, and you play your Sanguinary Guard without leaders and things like that, so that they're a little cheaper. I could see that being really interesting. I think there's a lot of dimension for doing some really cool stuff with that. And there's a general lack of Oath Reliance. Anytime you're playing a Death Company based attachment, the amount that you need Oath of Moment is pretty low. You are playing Sanguinary Guard, who hit on 2's baseline, so there's not a ton of need for Oath there. The Dante Squad effectively ignores modifiers because it has +1 to hit baseline. So you'll probably find a lot of the time that you'll be oathing, like provisionally, you'll be oathing for the Rage Captain, the Angel's Fang Captain. The Fang Captain, I don't like that as much as the Rage Captain. I'm not gonna lie. The Angel Captain, maybe. That just sounds like it's every version of Blood Angels. So you'll be oathing for that guy. You'll be oathing for like the conditional amount of shooting that you do have to just make sure your Infernal Pistols connect into something, right? That kind of space. You're going to be able to be like pretty independent of Oath of Moment in this attachment, which I think is a good thing. Anytime that you can be unreliant on Oath and just have it be a nice bonus tends to be good for you. Now, the weaknesses, I think it's really easy to get to play this attachment badly. And I don't mean that in like an insulting way, but I think it's going to be really easy to battle shock yourself because you're like, oh, I just really need this damage. And then you'll just not have your defensive stratagems online and you'll be very vulnerable to just getting bowled over by a competent opponent who manages the game well. Turning off your ability to interrupt and fight on death and AOC and all that kind of stuff is a genuine real cost for taking that battle shock. And if you get greedy for 2 effects when you really did, or for the 2 effects plus the bonus attack when you really didn't need it, it's going to be very, very easy for the game to snowball away from you. I think there's probably an argument in here for like trying to find the points for like a Calidus Assassin and things like that as well, in order to give you a bit more fight phase control. But trying to stick to just playing Blood Angels for this, I would probably play this with a Calidus Assassin. Incredibly limited shooting support, as I said before. There is just nothing in this. There is an advance and shoot stratagem, and you can use some of the defensive stratagems in theory. You can, you can do the 5 Field of Pain. You can do armor on a Death Company Dreadnought. You can armor contempt, and you can stick on death with a ball predator. But that is not what I would consider a good shooting sport when you compare it to something like Gladius Task Force or even Liberator, which has a fallback and shoot stratagem. Right, there's the ability to keep your shooting going a little longer. Is just not really here. I also think the stratagems are a little narrow. Now, that narrowness isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it is a weakness that the detachment pigeonholes you into playing a couple of specific units. And if those units get hit in a balance status or anything like that, this detachment definitely struggles for where it goes outside of that, right? Like this detachment here is the 3 things that are worth playing. Go and play them. And if you don't like those things, there's probably not a ton here for you outside of that. So if Death Company with jump packs, and maybe Sanguinary Guard and maybe Death Company on foot and Death Company Dreadnoughts don't get your goat, it's unlikely this attachment is going to have much for you. And then Two more things. The Blood Angels keyword on the Sticky Death stratagem. I got caught out by this the first time. I was like, oh, that's great on the Lord Lieutenant. Doesn't work on the Lord Lieutenant. It does not have the Blood Angels keyword. Being a Blood Angels detachment does not grant you the keyword. This has to be Blood Angels specific units from the Blood Angels Codex. And I think that does give you a genuine downside of it's going to be quite easy to catch yourself out and be like, oh, yeah, oh, no, I can't do that. So be conscious of that. And then it's also quite important to do for warning yourself. This kind of Blood Angels list is very vulnerable to Purge the Foe, which is a hilarious thing to be scared of. But you don't have a ton of units because you're playing a lot of attached units. Your units are all baseline 200-ish points. You'll have some limited training pieces, but I don't like JPIs very much in this attachment. I don't particularly find myself drawn to them. You could probably still run a squad or two if you wanted to, but I didn't find them particularly appealing. So you don't have a lot of ways to punch into smaller units efficiently. So I would definitely be conscious of that. That might be an argument in there for playing some of those like 5 mans of Death Company unattached, or potentially playing the Sanguinary Guard unattached. Right? I think there's definitely some space there to tweak that around to be a little happier with exactly how that stratagem spread goes out. Now, to use the same metric that I used with Xavo, how do I feel about this detachment? I would play this for a GT. I don't think I would be comfortable trying to push this for a super major. I think in the current environment, this kind of melee pressure build is good, but not incredible. There are lots of armies like this: World Eaters, Black Templars, Emperor's Children, Victor's Guard, and I don't think this is the best of them. And if I'm going to be going out there and trying to win a super major there and now, I would be trying to play the best of them. And I don't think this is that. And I think that's fine. I think this detachment is a meaningful and interesting upgrade or side grade to Liberator Assault Group that opens up some new play patterns and some units that are not super popular, while also giving you a bit of additional dimension and some cool utility, which is not a thing Liberator does very well. Liberator is all gas, no breaks. This detachment at least has some way to say to your opponent, hey, consider the consequences of what you're choosing to do. And I think that makes it a much more dynamic play pattern. And I think that's good. I think that's exactly what Blood Angels were looking for. This is a cool way to play them. Angelic Inheritor still exists. Liberator still exists. They're both still good detachments. Lost Brethren is garbage. So it's cool that this exists. And I think that's fine. But yeah, overall, I would feel comfortable playing this for like a GT or a team event where we wanted something specific in this role. I think while Victory's Guard exists, you'd be crazy to take this over Victory's Guard, but that's fine. Let's hope that, come Wednesday, Thursday next week, they don't. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Rage-Cursed Onslaught. It's a cool detachment. I think it's really interesting, and hopefully this is giving you some ideas to spitball off of for yourself. As always, this has been brought to you by StatCheck. If you like what you heard here, you can check out all of our other stuff on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/StatCheck. Just hit the same thing below. If you liked it, chuck a like, comment on the video. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any list ideas or what called your attention. If you'd like to support us a little bit more, you can check out YouTube memberships or patreon.com/StatCheck. And if you'd like to work more with me personally, you can check out stat-check.com/coaching. If you want to talk about Rage-Cursed Onslaught, drop me a message. Let's get some time on the books. Otherwise, I'll be back hopefully tomorrow. I don't know if I can commit. I've got 3 days of work this week before I go to America. So I will do what I can to get some more recordings in for these. But this one was interesting enough that I thought I would get one in. Nightmare Hunt will get covered eventually. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being with me. We'll catch you next time. I have to hit buttons.